Welcome back to the Uptime Podcast. I'm your host, Alan Hall. Heavy lift cranes and transportation equipment are vital to the construction and maintenance of wind turbines, from hoisting colossal tower sections to delicately placing turbine blades to the hub. People who operate these massive machines are the unsung heroes in the wind turbine world. Our guest in this podcast is Brian Thomas, Vice President of Business Development for Barnhart. And Barnhart began as a small family-owned company in Memphis, Tennessee, but has since grown to be a major player in the heavy lift and transportation industries with operations across the United States. For over 20 years, Barnhart has provided major maintenance services for blades, gearboxes, generators, yaw bearings, basically anything that is really heavy. And Barnhart has also assembled wind turbines and worked directly with the OEMs to construct some of the early wind projects in the United States. Brian, welcome to the program.
Alan, it is a treat to be here. Thank you. Thanks for having us on.
So I'm not a crane expert, and so it's great to talk to someone who is, because it is true, without the cranes, wind industry doesn't exist. And without that expertise, we would be nowhere. And you want to describe some of the early things that Barnhart participated in the United States in terms of wind turbine construction?
Sure. I will tell you that our being a crane provider, that really came out of the heavy industrial market where we were operating in refineries and power plants, nuclear plants. And then we get to a wind farm and they say, okay, we're gonna put up this turbine here, and then you're gonna walk across this field and put one up over there. And I'm like, excuse me? Walk across a field? And so the early days that where we stepped in was in the kind of the 1.5, 1.8 megawatt range, but they were still erecting V47s, the 640 kilowatt machine, and that was a typical construction crane, like an M2250, like a 250, 300 ton crawler, and those would generally be more favorable to walking across a field. But, it obviously turbines have grown, to amazing heights and sizes now. And so, just from a crane provider perspective, it's been very interesting to watch. And it's the riskiest thing that happens on a wind farm, is walking a crane from pad to pad.
Oh, yeah. And it is so complicated, some of these projects, especially early on. They were not in the easiest of locations. I don't even know how you've even accessed some of the early spots, West Texas and out your way and on the East Coast. Those are not easy places to put up wind turbines.
They're not, and we were probably skewed early. Our first project that we were really even introduced to was a project right in our backyard in East Tennessee called Buffalo Mountain. It was Invenergy's first foray into wind, and so it was up on a mountainside, up on a ridge line where we erected 15 of the Vestas V80s. Actually had to build a special blade trailer to kind of go up the switchbacks to even get the blades up to the top of the mountain. 20% grades getting up there, so that kind of skewed our perspective as to what's typical in the wind industry early on. But that has really kind of birthed an amazing business segment for Barnhart.
You seem to be pretty busy in the wind sector. And what are some of the early things that you learned from doing those projects? And you work directly with some of the OEMs on those projects too.
Correct. Yeah. We probably did 90% of the Vestas TSIs, the turbine supply and install agreements, in the early 2000s. And I think what was really interesting for us is there was a lot. It was really dominated by contractors, who were very good at what they do. And there's been some the major players in the industry are amazing, but it was really fun for us to come in as really a crane provider. But not only that, Barnhart has very much a reputation for innovation, for engineered tools, engineered solutions. And we were very fortunate with that OEMs gave us the opportunity to innovate, to create special lifting gear, We came up with a method to lift a tower section by it, with one crane using the whip line, kind of, we call it the tri-block, and a variety of other tools. So that we really saw a lot of opportunity for innovation, kind of for better thinking, and that really kind of helped us be successful.
Well, the OEMs must have seen something in you. And I know Barnhart has done a number of really complicated projects before Vestas knocked on your door. So they probably understood that you could do some really crazy things.
Correct. We enter this competition every year, the Rigging Job of the Year, with the SCNRA. It's kind of the fraternity of crane and transport people, the Specialized Carriers and Riggers Association. And we've won this award called the Rigging Job of the Year, or the Hauling Job of the Year. It's kind of fun when you get back on an airplane with a trophy and the flight attendant goes, "What's that for?" It's like, "Well, we won the Rigging Job of the Year." And they kind of go, "Huh, that's nice. Okay, take your seat." But we really have an amazing fleet of engineers in Memphis and spread out around the country that all they do every day is try to come up with engineered solutions that serve our clients' needs. And so the power industry has been, it's given us lots of opportunity to exercise that and be successful. Be it a feed water heat exchanger replacement, or a vessel installation, or even within the nuclear space, there's all kinds of opportunities for special toys, as we would say, cool tools.
Yeah, and in the United States, we've kind of hung around the 2 megawatt region on which wind turbine size onshore, but that seems to be changing more recently. You're starting to see 4s and 5s and 6s.
We've actually had the real privilege of being involved in a lot of the prototypes that have kind of come to market, and we were able to. We were on the first SG-145 4.5 megawatt Siemens platform. Did a project up in New York, and then turned around and we're actually helped out on the first Vestas 5.6 megawatt platform that came to the U.S. and then we were the prime erector of the first Cypress, which is the large GE 5.6. I guess now it's a 6 megawatt platform. So it has been. The turbine hub heights are obviously getting higher and taller. Not as crazy as Europe, but we're approaching that. And but the complexity of the turbine is one of the things that the OEMs have done an amazing job. Doubling, almost tripling the megawatt output. But there's a lot more that goes into the installation. And I think I've appreciated the OEMs saying, Can we call timeout, slow down, and let's camp right here and get really good at improving this 4.5 to 6 megawatt output range, and so I think that will be wise and helpful for everybody.
Give us some behind the scenes here on how this works. So let's just pick an OEM for a minute. I'll just choose GE because they're close to us here. So GE has come up with some new wind turbine. Let's say it's a 20 megawatt or whatever it's going to be. And it exceeds your current lifting capability, or maybe the equipment required you'd have to sort of build and think about. How soon do they contact you in the design phase so that you can actually assemble the first turbines?
Sometimes they do. I will say that, but and I would hand it to the OEMs. They have some really smart guys within their organizations that know cranes. Obviously, they're renting crazy amounts of cranes these days for, be it O&M services, major component replacements. But and again, I just had the privilege of being at Liebherr last week, and they will come and meet with the crane manufacturers and have conversations about where they see the turbine platforms growing. But I've also been really impressed. The OEMs have really done a good job of modularizing the nacelles, and so it's not just one big lift. You can have, the powertrain, drivetrain, can be a separate lift with the hub, and they're giving the erector, the contractor, the ability to kind of really pick and choose an erection strategy, and that's been very, very beneficial. And so that way you can, according to the crane assets that are available in the market, to the particular project, may be on a ridge line, or it may have a lot of crane breakdowns. And so a smaller crane with more picks may be more beneficial versus an area where you have very few crane breakdowns, and you want to make hay, and the big crane is the way to go, because you just don't have the cost of crane moves.
Does the OEM then, when they're designing the turbines, also look at the maintenance aspect in terms of lifts, like on gearbox replacement? Are they designing that into the assembly so when you get there, you can actually do those exchanges much more quickly than in the past?
Yeah, correct. And I think that there are obviously a lot of non-crane technology that's coming to market as well, that to be able to do that replacement as well, especially as the turbine heights get taller. We're on conversation today with one of those providers, and so that with the fact that it's an amazing stat. There are 45 900-ton hydraulics in the United States right now, 45 of them, and with another 5 coming, so 50 of this. It's not the largest all-terrain crane out there. It's a 1,200-ton model, but this 900-ton is you can move it very efficiently. You can assemble it pretty quickly, and we have a couple of them, and they're just a great machine that can really handle that below 110 meter hub height type typical O&M lifts. So it's so there's still quite a bit of crane assets out there that are able to do the major component replacements.
How far out are you guys typically scheduled? I know one of the big concerns in the industry is I can't get a crane. They're locked up for 6 months. Is that generally the case at the moment?
You can find a crane, and sometimes it is expensive to mobilize, and that way the wind farm owner may decide going, okay, I can spend the extra money and bring the crane a greater distance, maybe several states, or I can wait, and then I may have a couple of other turbines that may need work, and that way I can really amortize that large mobilization out over a handful of turbines. In terms of construction, there's still a lot of assets that are currently in the country, and more coming in daily. So yeah, it's I've seen years, lots of years where they're going, oh gosh, we're going to run out of cranes. I've just never actually seen it happen, and I've seen assets come up from Mexico. We've brought some assets up from Mexico, or assets come from Europe, and so that is, in some way, crane providers go, oh, there's needs in the United States. Let's go see if we can have a piece of the pie.
Yeah, and Barnhart has engineers on staff to handle some of the more complicated lifts and handle the unique situations. And I wanted to ask you about how many engineers do you have on staff at the moment?
We would say roughly about 65. A majority of those guys are in Memphis. We have an engineer sales service department, a project engineering group, and then an R&D group. And those guys really just kind of developing tools. But if a customer had a compromised rotor, compromised nacelle, a thermal event, that where you're kind of going, okay, now the typical way of safely lifting this turbine or component is no longer available. We have a variety of ways that we can engineer a safe lift, and that's what we have. A lot of tools, spreader bars, so that can make, even if we're not sure of where the CG is now because it's off center, we've got ways to compensate for that. So it's it's one of the things that is really nice. And then we have engineers kind of spread out throughout the branches, and that's a nice thing because you've got some folks that are close that can run, take a look at the turbine, and we can, again, provide a customized, safe solution for the owner.
Well, I think that safety is such a key here because you're lifting such heavy objects, and sometimes they are compromised. And then recently on LinkedIn, I think there's some video, and I don't know where that was from, but it wasn't in the United States, of a lift of a compromised blade and it letting go, and guys are standing on the ground like way too close to that situation. How much effort goes into those?
The fact that they put wind turbines in windy places, it's like, come on. Cranes don't like wind, and they don't like, handling, objects that have a big sail area like a rotor. And so there you go. That challenge number one is we're, especially with the turbine heights getting tall, it really depends on, the wind's in your face or in your back. It's a whole lot safer than if it's coming at you from the side. There's a lot of challenges when it comes to really performing things safely, and so that I think we are a mature enough industry, and you kind of look at the numbers. There's not a lot of cranes that have gone over, and when you do see the ones that have, you can kind of point back to they probably shouldn't have done that, and so we know. I think the industry is pretty good about going, okay, this is the line, we don't cross that. And so I think that's why you see there's thousands of lifts, yes, thousands of lifts as safe lifts within the wind industry, and they're tough, challenging lifts out there, and there's a lot of really, really good crane providers and maintenance contractors as well that are doing it safe.
And how much prep work has to happen before you come onto a construction site in terms of like even the geology? Is the ground firm enough to handle the crane, especially if it gets windy or a rainstorm's coming? What do we do? I assume that's all planned out weeks or months in advance.
Typically, it's weeks, but that is one of the first things that obviously we check is there a geotech report, geology report of the crane pad. Can it withstand the loads that we're going to put on it? And how do you match an efficient matting scheme with what's currently on site, or do you need to come in and have civil work done? That is something that is typically done, and then you're looking at, you're obviously constantly watching weather and wind data. So that's very definitely goes into the planning, and then you're kind of going, okay, that combined with the how safe of or how risky of a lift is it? If you're pulling a generator, you're well within your chart, then yeah, that's a much less complicated event than a compromised rotor, where the wind farm was installed 15 years ago, and nobody's been on this actual crane pad with a heavy lift crane. And so those are two different extremes that you have to pay attention to.
Well, that gets to my next question, because I wondered about that. On the repowering situation where you had an existing site and it's been there 10 plus years, and now they're repowering it, they're putting a slightly bigger generator in it typically, but also the rotor diameter gets much bigger. Do you have to go back and kind of re-engineer and look to see we can still use that site, or we got to upgrade the site to bring in a bigger crane to handle the rotor size?
Yeah, you do. And I think that there is, well, and I think it depends, it depends on, did they pull the crane pads out, after the construction of the wind farm and that happens a lot. And so you kind of have to rebuild that crane pad anyway. From an O&M's perspective, sometimes they will have had big hydraulics that have come in there. And then maybe you're looking at a larger, maybe a lattice boom crawler that is now going to be performing the repower scope.
It seems to be really complicated, but the pace in which you guys must be getting called at has to be increasing all of a sudden because of the IRA bill and all the the money on the repowering side alone, and plus new construction that's happening. There seems to be a great deal of desire to get things done quickly because the tax incentives are there. How does that affect you and the operations you're doing in the wind industry?
That is true. I will say, Barnhart is a little bit of a niche contractor because we are not a full BOP provider, and so we are a little bit of a niche market. We do think repowers in our sweet spot. The obviously compromised turbines, thermal events, things like that are very much in our sweet spot. But we will perform a handful of wind turbine construction projects, greenfield turbine erection. We're doing a repower right now on the West Coast in California. Took down some vintage V47s and erecting some V150s. And I heard the V47s were operating unbelievable. So if you want to buy one, they may still have a few for sale. I think they are kind of finding their way to a new home to continue to generate electricity. But yeah, the activity has been interesting in that we were hearing a lot about work that's in 25, 26, 27, and even getting some some projects that are even booked out that far, and trying to get agreements by the end of this year that would involve contracts that would be executed in 27. So that gives you a little bit of an it's a really interesting dilemma that I think folks are in, because and then projects push, and so it's like.
And speaking of project push, what is happening with offshore, and how are you getting involved in that? There seems to be a lot of port activity at the moment, a little bit in the water, but mostly onshore.
We've had the privilege to kind of partner and JV with a company called Elevon, and they're deeply tied to maritime operations. So it's more of a marine logistics plus the hub operations is kind of what we're saying is what we can provide. We're a crane company that has over 600 cranes, up to 1,400 ton, even though that's not big enough, and a lot of a hydraulic platform trailer. We have 600 or 700 lines of hydraulic platform trailer, and those two particular tools are very key. And we've partnered with some crane providers that have the really mega cranes, the 2,500 ton, 3,000 ton crawlers, and Buckner is kind of who we've kind of partnered with. So but the offering I think we have is again, it's the large offshore projects in Europe have been like up to a 6 megawatt, 6 to 8, 9 megawatt, and now all of a sudden here in the U.S., let's just start at 12. Let's just go big, and then go to 15. Okay, well let's not start. Let's not. So that has been. We are handling the U.S. market is going to be handling the largest offshore wind turbine components, in our hemisphere, obviously, and between Europe and the U.S. But we are looking to try to see, we think our expertise is how, you've got really large turbine components in very small plots of land, and how do you most efficiently use that plot of land in at the hub, where you've got components coming in, you're staging them, and then those components going out in a timely manner to the installation vessel. And so that we were very fortunate. We were very close at Vineyard. It was hard because I think there's a lot of the OEMs are looking at the market going, okay, can the U.S. contractors handle this? And we resoundingly say yes, give us a shot. But I think it may take a while for that tide to turn.
I think that tide is changing rapidly just because of the demand worldwide, is that they can't outsource it to a Norwegian company or a Danish company to do those things. They have to do it locally in some aspects, and tax-wise, there's reasons to do it. But I think you mentioned a really interesting piece about the way we're building ports and infrastructures, that the landing spots are barely larger than the turbines. There's not a lot of wiggle room in some of these ports. It's amazingly tight, the way they're designed, and that requires a lot of special engineering, doesn't it, to sort of plan out how to move product around and get it where it needs to go.
Yeah, it really does. And if you think about, you have options of going either storing horizontally or storing vertically. You're thinking no big deal. Well, your vertical storage, all of a sudden you've got a tower that is 350 ton and it's pretty tall, and you don't want it, you want it stable and safe. And so it's obviously vertical storage is much more efficient, but and when you have a lot of vertical towers, how do you efficiently get that over to where it can be loaded out? And there are tools out there and means and methods to actually transport those vertically. Yeah, that's very, very doable. Well, it's pretty amazing when you especially when you look at it on a computer and you're going, huh, okay. And then you kind of see video of like, okay, it can be done. And you kind of look where the CG is, and it's all engineered, and so it can be performed safely.
And that's where Barnhart comes in, right? Is that Barnhart has been doing creative lifts and safe lifts at the same time for a number of years, and particularly as these wind turbines do get to 20 megawatts, that's coming, and these blades are just going to get incredibly long. It takes a new skill set.
I do think the industry is going to have to kind of turn the dial, go to a new whiteboard, and go, okay, we need to come up with some better solutions. You look at just the installation vessels, that the limit of those, and you kind of look in the future and go, if everybody wants to be at the dance at the same time, somebody's not going to have a partner. And so can we come up with some better mousetraps? But you're looking at such tremendous investment. And so I think you're going to have to really see owners, OEMs, and folks like myself going, hey, we're willing to go to think outside the box. And we've been engaging in conversations like that to go, are there better ways than just the standard? Okay, we're just going to get a big ship and go, and you look at the monopiles as well. Goodness gracious, just tremendous weights. And the folks that are installing them are we have a tremendous amount of appreciation and admiration for those guys.
Well, I think you come at a good time in the industry, because we've seen some of those early installations have trouble. And when you get to the United States, what's really new territory, you don't have any offshore history to speak of. It's going to be complicated, and it's time to rethink some of these approaches. And Barnhart is going to be key into that effort, I'm sure.
We have a lot of amazing folks that have amazing ideas, and you put them all in the same room, and sometimes you lock the door, push some pizza underneath the door, and some amazing stuff comes out. But it is there is great opportunity, and so I think that there's a lot of folks like myself, that we will, this is the beauty of the free market in the U.S., that we will innovate, we will come up with solutions. If there's opportunity to do that profitably, it's going to be a fun ride.
Well, most of the OEMs and definitely operators in the United States know of Barnhart, but if they wanted to reach out to you, how do they do it?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways. We have a website, barnhartcrane.com, and there's some places where you can put your name and info in there. Or real easy, Brian at barnhartcrane.com. You could reach me personally. So
Brian, thanks for being on the podcast today. It's really a real pleasure to speak with you. And I've learned a lot about the crane industry, the lifting industry. So I want to have you back on. And when you get that first big offshore project, you got to come back on because that's going to happen pretty soon.
I would love that, Alan. That would be a treat. Thank you very much.